amazing. I now
Awesome.
know what it's like to be in the sun all the time, and it's a game changer, I tell you. Like,
What's the coldest it gets to in Florida in like
what?
a winter? What's the sort of coldest it would get to in Florida?
Um, I was here in December around the holidays, and it was getting as low as like in the 30s and 40s, which is pretty cold for South Florida. But like I'm used to that type of weather since I'm from Maryland. But people in Florida
Yeah, of
are
course.
like babies about it. But I totally get it now. I think like your body just adjusts, and you're like, this is so cold.
100%. Like the difference of complete like tropical sort of weather versus the normal sort of summer winter like cycle. It's like in Australia, the south, Melbourne, where I'm from, is that same sort of similar to Maryland. Like obviously not getting as cold, but summer winter normally, and then like the north is a lot more tropical where it's like wet and dry season rather than summer, winter, like spring, autumn, etc.
Where are you exactly, just for everyone who's tuning in?
Melbourne, Australia. So right down sort of the southeast there, so like the second biggest city in Melbourne, other than Sydney. Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I know some people are gonna like go back and rewatch this, and they'll probably
awesome.
age and like I know both of our audiences are going to see this, but why don't you just give a background before we dive into all the talking points that you laid out
Yeah, awesome.
at your organ?
So my name's Aaron. I run Audra Performance, athletic development, personal training business out of Melbourne. And yeah, I work with a whole range of sort of different athletes and general population, basically focused on just making people move better, live healthy lives through their own body, through their own sort of perception, I guess, of their life, and enjoy their training, whether that be, yeah, like a young 13-year-old athlete or someone that is 65 that's had hip replacements that just wants to move better. Like my view is that training all falls on the same sort of spectrum there, whether it's a young, healthy person, an older, maybe not as healthy person. It's just different levels on the same spectrum.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and we are going to dive into that today on youth training, but also
100%.
for adults. And yeah, why don't we just dive into
Yeah, awesome.
what we had
We'll
planned?
go.
We could go on for hours, everyone. But, I mean, we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. So the first sort of point that I have for us to touch on was obviously we work with quite, I'd say quite different, like you're very focused on a lot of youth athletes, which I think is awesome, and it's great foundation setting there. I'd love to know your thoughts on how that differs from basically training youths and having that as a huge focus to adult training, and what sort of concepts match up and what differences you find.
Mm-hmm. That is an amazing question. And funny enough, like when I started my career, I trained mainly senior citizens. And what I was finding was, they needed this the most. It's a population we tend to forget about. It's like you're either like a youth athlete or an athlete or a pro, and it's like, oh, like, people who are done sports or retired, like whatever. But these people need it the most, and they just want to make sure that they're healthy. They can walk to their mailbox. They can golf. They can hike. They can do things that they love later in life. And I love that, because I think there's like this mindset when people turn like 50, they're like, oh, well, just wait, it goes downhill. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to. I mean, the body is so capable, it's so adaptable. You can be stronger at age 50 than you were at age 20.
100%,
And I'm sure
100%.
you can agree, like even like in college, like, yeah, like we were in good shape, but I feel now as a 31-year-old, I'm like in much better shape. Like it's insane. So I think the training is going to be, it's similar. Like with the senior citizens, we did like heavy deadlifting. Obviously we progressed it. Like we
All good, all good.
but yeah, everyone's doing similar movements. And I had some very impressive older people who were deadlifting over like 135 pounds, or doing
100%.
push-ups from the floor, or pull-ups, and even like power exercises. Like medicine ball throws, or just like low impact plyometrics, just to keep them developing their fast twitch muscles. So yeah, I would say it's similar. And when you're teaching the youth, you're still starting at that movement pattern teaching. And then someone who's a senior citizen, it's like you're revisiting that as well too, because maybe they're new to this stuff as well.
100%.
It's just awesome. It's just awesome with both populations. You can just see the progression and how beneficial it is for both. It's like one population's just beginning their life, and then the other's just like towards the end, but like they still can crush it.
Exactly. Like there's still so much room for improvement. Like with, say, some of my like adult clients that haven't really had a big focus on fitness earlier in their life, and they've only really gotten into it sort of as they've gotten older. At the age of 50, they're healthier, faster, arguably faster, fitter, stronger, and move better than they did at 25. Like, yeah, by a conventional, they're like age older, yeah. But if they move better, their body feels better on a day-to-day. They can do more accomplished feats. Like, is that technically older? Is it not? Like, where do you draw the distinction as to what makes you old?
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And then, like, obviously, going back on the other end of, like, the youth sort of perspective, like, the way I see one of the main differences there is, are you building or refining? And this goes to whether they're athletes or just general kids you're trying to keep active, and older adults. Like, you're trying to obviously ingrain these good patterns into them, like neurologically, and like teaching them to move within their own body, like improving their proprioception, like coordination, and even just keeping their body dialed in as they're growing, especially through like puberty and the like rapid growth spurts. If you're not constantly performing a lot of different movements, activities and stuff, that's why you end up with, say, a lot of like teenagers that have had these rapid growth spurts and have done no physical exercise or anything through that time. And they look like they're trying to walk on stilts just because they haven't had to explore and really practice the skill of coordinating their body. And then whether that goes on to adulthood and they've never really participated in anything, and it looks like they could go for a light jog, and it could look like they're trying to basically hop on the spot just because they've never had to practice the demand of running. And whether that person needs something super basic or super advanced, like, it's besides the point. It's just getting them better at doing what they need to do.
Now, do you think everyone is an athlete?
I would say so, yeah. In my opinion, obviously varying capacities as to what we can do. Very few people are going to be super, super dominant at a lot of different things. Everyone's going to have normally their own niches. Like, a pro in one situation might be a con in another. So say, like, I'm quite tall, like I'm about 6'6", and I've got super long arms. Awesome for basketball. Anything that requires me to be quite small, quite fast, doesn't really work as well for. But it's neither bad or good. Like, it's all how you frame it. And then going back to everyone being an athlete, I would strongly say so. Like, I think everyone can benefit from sprint training, obviously modified to an appropriate intensity and sort of skill level. Strength training, like power work, like you're saying, plyometrics, jumping, everything like that. Even for someone like a 60-year-old, 65-year-old, 70-year-old, however long it goes, like, they're all good capacity training methods. And it's all about, in my opinion, the end adaptation you're trying to get. So I wouldn't just put jumping for the sake of saying you can jump. I would say, what are we trying to get out of this jumping? What's the end goal there? Is this the most efficient way? If it is, awesome, we keep going. If it's not, we refine, find something that might work a little more efficiently, might work quicker, might work with less overall sort of cost benefit there, that may be less likely to hurt you or something like that, and just go from there. And it's the sort of thing, like, people think, as you were saying, you get to age 50 and it's all downhill from there. Like, there are people in their mid-70s running marathons that neither of us could come close to. Like, it's crazy. Powerlifters in their 60s, like, lifting over 200 kilos on a deadlift, like 405 pounds. Like, it's insanity. But it just shows that you don't finish your capacity at 50, and it doesn't just drop down linearly. Like, if you keep training, you keep that.
And that's important too. Like, you have to put in the work. It's not going to be easy if you really want to continue to get stronger when you're older, and have healthy joints and have strong bones. It's going to be a lot of work. but it is rewarding. And like you said, you can do like marathons, or there's a lot of like older CrossFitters that are like cranking out pull-ups. I'm like,
Exactly.
this is really impressive. And actually, when I was snowboarding last month, I'm seeing like people like in their 80s, like on snowboards, just like bombing it down the mountain. And
Yeah.
I'm like still like trying to like get my feet under me. And I'm just like, dang, like I want to be that. And
100%.
inspiring. And even something like snowboarding, it's like you got to be really strong and have a lot of endurance to be able to last an 8-hour day on the slopes. And
100%.
these people were just bombing it down the mountain, and they were just nonstop. And I was like, that's amazing.
It's the sort of thing as well, like if you don't do it very often, you're so sore in so many unusual places the next day because it's just such a unique demand on the body there.
Yeah.
Like another point there, I saw a video the other day of Tony Hawk at, I think he's at 56 now, on like one of the mega ramps. It's basically a vertical drop doing a 720. Like how many people alive, regardless of age, could do something like that? And his body would have gone through the absolute trials and tribulations of the amount of falls, breaks, concussions, everything under the sun, and he's still able to perform that because he's given that demand over time. And it's the sort of thing, like I've read a good, I think it was an article actually, about how every 10 years is a great point to essentially reassess your entire training. Like look at all your methodologies. So whether from 15 to 25, you do a lot of like heavy lifting, you're in your real like sort of bro phase, as a lot of people are when they get into the gym initially. And then you start to smarten up, you refine your methods, you understand a little bit more about what you're doing. But then as your body sort of hits another age bracket, essentially, not to associate that with performance drop, but I mean, at the end of the day, your joints have more wear on them. Your muscles and legs have more kilometers. So just being conscious of that and working it accordingly, like it's the sort of thing where a youth athlete that's 15-year-old could just basically roll up to their game, whether it be soccer, lacrosse, whatever it be, and jump straight on the field and play. Not smart, not really, not the best warm-up, but they're probably going to get through without any major injury. If either of us tried that or someone maybe 20 years our senior, it's not going to go as well. So you do have to be a lot more conscious in that sort of element as to giving your body what it needs to succeed. And that changes sort of life period to life period. Like I'd say in your teens to your 20s to your 30s to your 40s are all going to look quite different there as to how much warming up you need, how much cooling down you should do, the amount of like recovery you should really try and incorporate outside those sessions. And yeah, a lot of sort of factors like that where the training and performance itself may not change hugely, but the associated work outside that does differ. And that's where a lot of that sort of perception of people dropping off happens, because they can't do the same things on game day because they're not devoting that time outside of that game day to match that demand. Like you look at someone like Tom Brady, he's obviously unparalleled longevity, but you look at the amount of prep and time and how seriously he treats his recovery, his nutrition, his mental recovery even. They're all huge factors that so many people pass over. And I would say don't give them their due diligence there to be able to maximize how much they can do because they're not willing to put that extra time in. But then they blame their body and saying, oh, like it's just my body wearing out. But like, is it really?
Yeah. That's such a great tip, to just constantly reevaluate every several years how your training is going. And yeah, it's always going to be changing, and your body is always going to need a new stimulus. Or maybe you start to develop certain imbalances or asymmetries, and you need to just correct those. I think like the best example I can think of here is like a marathon runner in their 60s, and maybe they're just running so much like over and over again that their gait just becomes totally jacked up. And then maybe they have to go into the weight room or do more like mobility work, or like really working on their running form. So it is important to just really look at your training program and analyze it, and just know your body, really in tune with when you're feeling sore, when you feel like you're not having as much output as you normally would. And the recovery piece, that's also a good one. That's your output is dependent on how well and how fast you can recover. And I don't know what your top are for recovery, but I always say like sleep, nutrition, and then stress management, which could mean like focusing on your breath, or even just meditation, or going for walks in nature and getting sun.
100%.
So those are like my top three. But everything else, like cryotherapy, ice baths, like cool, like I guess. But if you have nutrition, sleep, and stress, you're good.
Exactly. You want to have the big pillars in place before you worry about the 1 to 5%ers on top there. Like, yeah, you can have a $5,000 cryo session every day for a month, but if you're sleeping 4.5 hours a night, like, it's not going to save you. You're trying to empty the Titanic sinking down with a little paper cup. Like, it's not going to do much.
Yeah,
and that's the sort of thing.
If it's a nervous system breakdown, that's not going to help. It's not going to solve what's going on internally.
100%. And even going back to the runner you were mentioning, in terms of like the movement efficiency and the like there, like the more volume put in with a slightly suboptimal sort of position, gait, whatever it may be, the bigger the sort of consequence becomes. Like if I have a pebble in my shoe and I do a kilometer of walking, like it's not really a big deal. But if I walk 100 kilometers with that same pebble in my shoe as a incorrect gait or form sort of issue, that becomes a lot more magnified. And then the amount of stress that somewhere up or down my body is going to take becomes so much larger than it would be if I worked on that consciously as I'm going along in that time period.
Yeah, that's really
What are your thoughts on the sort of development and maturation of like a youth athlete, say in like the 10 to 15-year-old range, like and how that would differ to an adult there?
So it can be an exciting time for some, and it can be a frustrating time for some. So your early matures are the ones who are at a huge physical advantage because they're getting stronger, they're getting faster, maybe they're taller and have a longer stride length. And then you have your late bloomers who are a year or two behind, and they're shorter, maybe they're more uncoordinated, they're slower, their change of direction isn't as sharp. So with the late bloomers, I really like to empower them and just tell them, hey, like, here's some things that you can control, and we can do the work in the weight room. We can really spend this time to work on your technique, but also really own your technical skills in your sport. So your soccer skills, or your lacrosse skills, and your 1v1s and your dodging, like that stuff is like really good for late bloomers. But as far as a mental standpoint, it can get hard because then the parent gets frustrated, and the parent just needs to be educated that, look, like this is just an organic process of child development. And this is something we can't change what happens from a physiological standpoint, but we can get them the right training. And it's also going to take some patience. And I always like to ask parents during this time, like, what do you want most for your kid? So if it's like a 10-year-old, like, do you want them to be the best at age 10? Or are you willing to make sure we focus on what we can, they stay healthy, we're not putting too much pressure on them, and then they're the best when they finish high school or they're in college? So those conversations are tough to have, because I get it, like people are frustrated, but we have to remember that these are kids whose bones are growing, whose muscles are growing. They're going through a lot of like social and emotional changes, and girls are hitting puberty early. Like it's a tough time. But I always like to come back to we can do what we can control. One more thing I do want to say about late bloomers is I've found that when they get to that point after the growth spurt, they do tend to surpass the early maturers if they do the proper training. And not just physically, but they also surpass them mentally, because the late bloomers have to really work. Whereas like the early maturers are like, oh, well, we're just going to outrun everyone. Like we're giving everything, like, so the late
entirely.
exciting because they just develop this grit, this like, okay, nothing is handed to me. Like I gotta work for it. And like when they're in high school and college, they're like the grittiest kids. So I always tell parents like this, like it sucks now, but like I promise it will get better.
100%. Like it's neither a pro or a con. There's going to be two sides to every coin like that.
Yeah.
Like the two biggest points I take out of everything you've said there is a combination of delayed gratification. You may not get it instantly. Do you want them to be good now? Like, are you going to win this game this weekend? Or do you want them to win a Div 1 championship in college 10 years down the line or whatever it may be? And then also a stoic mindset of just be willing to put in the work, focus on the process, not the outcome. If you're only worried about winning the game, like there's so many steps to accomplish before you get there, you're probably not even going to get there. Do what you can today, control your actions, be the best you can, and then let everything else take care of itself. Like all you can control is what you're doing in the moment. There's no future, there's no past. You're going to get caught anxious thinking about what may come, what may not happen, what may happen, or you're going to get caught in the past where you're thinking about previous things that have happened but aren't real now. And getting distracted there will like allow you to, or will force you to sort of not be present and not make the most of that moment. And then obviously sort of the difference of like the early bloomers versus late bloomers, it's quite interesting. Like I pretty much agree with your theory there of the ones that feel they have the adversity to go up against have more practice going against adversity. They have to learn to overcome a disadvantageous situation. Yeah. The people that, whether it be just very genetically talented at a sport or are just great athletes to begin with and go through that sort of early maturation period, they don't have their back up against the wall. Like they may not have experienced it. Some may be lucky enough to be put in situations as well where they artificially or like, artificially created manufactured situations like that where they have to back against the wall perform, and they may develop it that way, but it's not like a constant thing. It's not a constant theme in their training and sport and endeavors where someone that is behind physically or maturationally wise or whatever it may be, or maybe just less talented and have to work substantially harder, have to put in all those extra 1%ers of like the extra recovery to try and improve themselves as best they can, whether it be more film room study to actually understand their sport better, whether it be more technical work. Those are all great leveling factors where you give enough of a time frame, you can overtake that genetic gap and more. Like you look at someone like Kobe Bryant, where I would say it's a perfect combination of both. Very physically talented, no one's going to deny that, but not the most physically talented. Like he wasn't the highest jumper, he wasn't the fastest runner, he wasn't the most skilled player, but worked on all of those individual pieces of his game to actually put them together. Like was known as a relentless film room man, would put in 4 sessions a day of 2 to 3 hours, basically working on the fundamentals to be so good at fundamentals that no one was better than him. And then you look at what that leads to, where he's doing these insane things. He's dropping 81 points and things like that, where people are like, how is that even conceivable? Because he's so good at the basics. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's so many examples like that of people who just work their tails off and just really enjoy the process. And then like people like Kobe or like Alex Morgan or even Serena Williams, it's like they're still getting better. Tom Brady, still getting better. Like I think everyone's like, oh, well, we need to be good for like this year, for this like U12 season. It's like, well, look at the greats. And like, did they get a little bit better each year? A little bit better, a little bit better? Yes. Like your 12-year-old is going to be okay. Like
100%.
I know it's hard. And I've coached so many kids. I'm not a parent. I don't think I'll ever be one, but I understand it's the hardest job in the world. And like, I want the best for my soccer players and athletes I work with.
Of course.
But I also want to be realistic. In terms of physiology, but also in terms of just developing this mental resilience and really leaning into the process. Like it's going to get hard. Like if you are a youth athlete, you are going to fail thousands of times. You're going to cry. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be slow. It's going to happen, everyone. Like,
100%.
But then when you
it's life.
It's life. It really is. And it's like, and then when you accomplish something amazing, you look back on all those bad times and you're like, dang, that was awesome. Like, 'cause
I wouldn't even necessarily say bad times. I'd say, like, I would consider something a fail if you haven't learned from it. If you're
yeah,
taking something out of it, whether it even be a perspective, like when you win for too long, you lose the element of being humble. And you need that to keep you humble. So it's like the I don't know how often it happens in NFL, but basically going an undefeated season and then roll into the finals thinking you're top shit, thinking you're the best thing that ever happened to the world, and you get beat by a team that shouldn't have even come close to you on paper because they kept putting in the work. They were realistic. They didn't have their heads up their asses. And that's exactly it. Like, those losses ended up being positive elements to help that team potentially beat the other team. Whereas
yeah,
that other team only winning, you have that one perspective and it gets drilled into you that you're the best, it's just going to come to you. Rather than you trying to take all those actions to be the best you can and trust the process that at the end of the day or the end of the week, end of the month, end of the year, whatever it may be, that you're going to get that goal. You're going to accomplish what you need to accomplish to get there. And
yeah,
it's not having that be too murky in your mind. Like, obviously, you can only control what you do on the day, but then you do that one day, you do it the next day. And a week quickly turns into a month, into a year. And then before you know it, your under 12 season has become an under 16 season. You're playing at state level or something like that by just doing the best you can every day.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you corrected me on that, Aaron, because it's like these, when we do fail, we always say, oh, that was bad. And I agree with you. I think that is the wrong word to use. It's just, it was what it was.
100%.
And if you use that failure to learn, to continue to get better at your craft, and to just fall in love with what you're doing even more, then it's totally worth it. And like you had said earlier, this is life. And I don't know, like when I was growing up, like my parents had never put too much pressure on me, but like if I failed, like my dad was a hard ass. Like, I hate to say it, but he was like, Erica, life's not fair. Like, you got to deal with it. And like, I'm so glad he called me out on it. And like, has that built who I am today when I fail in my career and being an entrepreneur and trying to be a good strength coach? Like, yeah, like I always go back to that time. I'm like, shoot, life isn't fair. I got to keep working. I got to keep getting better. I think like everyone just collapses when a kid fails or when they're like the slowest on the team. It's like, well, do you want them to be perfect at everything they're doing? Like, what type of adult do we want to build?
Exactly.
And it's
100%.
a really hard question for people to ask themselves. But
it's fostering better people rather than just better athletes. You want them to be able to go into their life and have success in every area rather than just whether it be athletics or whatever sort of event they choose. And it's interesting, like going back to the failure sort of point there, I feel that a lot of people get very emotional over like, I didn't succeed, I failed, like I'm so bad. But they look at it in hindsight, whether that be a week, a month, however long after the fact of the event that's happened there, and look at it with a completely different perspective because they don't attach that emotional perspective to it or that emotional sort of bias of this is how I felt in the moment. Like I'm crushed, I'm defeated, I feel like I'm worthless because they're so emotional at that time. But then a year on, they look back at it and go, oh, like I can see that I may have felt that then, but that led me to this, and this. And they're all positive things that have had them on an upward trajectory. But at the time, they thought it was their lowest point because there's that emotional component to it of I'm not good enough, blah, blah, blah. And being able to almost take that out in the moment is such a big thing to be able to speed up that process, in my opinion. Like my general rule for whether it be myself or a lot of athletes that have a hard loss or something like that is you get 24 hours to grieve, console, cry yourself to sleep, whatever you need to do to let that emotional component out, feel it, experience it. Don't necessarily mute it. Like you want to validate it, but then move on. Once that's done, it's in the past, you finished it. Now you're just basically looking at the upward trajectory. What can you do from here? What can you move on? What can you prove? What can you learn from it? And reframe it in that sort of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very valuable insight there. And yeah, I think it's super important to just develop that resiliency around failures, and
100%.
just continue to improve. And like
Never
you
be
said,
satisfied.
yeah. And like, look, it's okay. Like, it's okay. Like, we're not saying like don't get emotional. Like, feel your feelings. Like, be upset if something happens. But like,
Exactly.
the 24-hour rule is great. It's like, okay, like, feel frustrated, feel upset, like, go cry. But like, tomorrow when you wake up, it's on. Like, if
Exactly. When you got to kick the day in the pants, that's what you do.
yeah.
100%.
What
100%.
what else did you have in your notes? I forget. Were we going to talk about lacrosse and soccer? I forget.
Let's go on to general holistic development of athletes. Like, how do you approach if a youth under 12 athlete came to you and said, I want to get better at everything? What's your sort of plan of attack there? What's your thought process?
Mm-hmm. I'm really big on just everything that allows human beings to feel their most energized, their most excited, whether it's on the field or off. So we do inventory every week, and the categories I do are their physical training. So that's like doing your skill work, you're getting in the gym, you're getting stronger, you're resilient to injury. Stress management. So how do you handle stress? Do you meditate? Do you take a break from screens? Do you go for walks in nature? Recovery. So that could be like their sleep, their nutrition, and then academics, because they have to be good students. Like it's great to be good at your sport, but it's only going to take you so far. Like, you're going to play that last game.
100%.
It's a very small percentage of people who go on to play professional. Yes, I want everyone to strive for that if that's your goal, but we also have to remember that there's going to be a time when it's over and you need to have your academics or something else that you're passionate about. So
100%.
I also include like other hobbies in there, because they can't just put themselves in one box and be soccer players. And I had this discussion with a guest on my podcast the other day, and we were talking about Serena Williams, and we're like, wow, like, she just embodies just a powerful woman, not just for her tennis playing side, but she's a mom, she's a business owner, like, she's a brand, like, she has her hands in everything. And like, that's really inspiring for just like young athletes or young female athletes who want to own a business or who want to do stuff other than sports. So I think it's important to always have something else going on. And then the last thing I have them take inventory on is their purpose. And this one is the most important, because a lot of people do everything backwards. So they focus on the external rewards first, whether it's like, get the stats up, or playing time, or scholarships. But those tend to not be sustainable, and it doesn't like really help you develop your love for what you're doing, because you are putting a lot of pressure on yourself. Whereas if you find your purpose, like if you feel good playing your sport, or you feel you can express yourself in a creative way, or you feel excited or energized, and you have that purpose to just train because you love it, then that's going to be much more sustainable. And if something bad happens, like, you're just like, oh, that doesn't faze me. Like, let's keep going.
You roll with the punches. 100%. It's attaching yourself to your worth, your value, to something that is essentially out of your control. Like, whether I have an amazing game or not, I could score, I could not score. Like, there's so many other factors that aren't within your control there. So I could have the best game of my life and not score as a striker or something like that. But
yeah,
does that then mean that that game was worse than one where I scored 3 goals, but they were all tap-ins and I played 5 minutes and then got injured? Like, not really. And then going back to the Serena Williams there, I think someone like that, where they've obviously got so many different things going on, I love listening to podcasts with someone like that where they don't touch on their sport at all. Like, you could,
so good.
if you didn't know it was them, there could be an interesting conversation with a business owner, a mum, whatever it may be, and they don't even touch on the thing that most people know them for. And I think that's so empowering there for someone that is generally seen through one lens. You're an athlete, like, that's all you do. You don't say anything else. And then looking at people come out and talk against politics and the like, where Did you see Zlatan come out and criticize LeBron for talking about politics recently?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, and like LeBron's
That
like, mate, you're coming at the wrong one. And that's exactly it, where he has so many other ventures. If you didn't know LeBron as an NBA athlete, he'd still have an amazing perspective to talk about, from his philanthropy works, from his donation and like setting up of schools. Like, is it the I Believe or I Promise school? Or something along those lines, where he's basically put thousands of kids through schools and has an amazing perspective on all life in general, going through probably quite a poor upbringing, as I'm sure many people would know about him, to being a very, very wealthy man. Like, would be amazing to hear from him, not even related to basketball. Same sort of idea there, where life experience and your own perception, sport is a way of developing that, but it is not the only development of that. Like, it extends so far beyond just what happens on field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Zlatan thing was just, I was like, just stay out of it.
100%. Like, if someone wants to comment, let them use their platform to make the change they see fit. Obviously, within reason, but for something like that, where he's obviously quite an influential figure, I see minimal harm in that. And like, Zlatan can come out and say that, but then can get rebutted just as hard.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of having a platform that you're able to speak relatively freely from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right.
I do want to come back to purpose. And I want to talk about it in the sense of just like some people can't, like, they don't find it right away. Like, there's some youth athletes that they're like, yes, like soccer or lacrosse, that's my purpose. I love it. Like, I'm willing to like get out there every day. But then you have like some athletes where they're just like lukewarm about their sport, and maybe that purpose comes later, or they just never have it at all. And
100%.
I don't think we can ever force purpose on people. It has to be discovered. And that's okay. Like, if I always tell my girls, like, if you end up quitting soccer in high school and you want to do, like, I don't know, like you want to play the trumpet or something, like, that's great. Like, I'm glad you found like what you truly enjoy and what your purpose is. Like, it's not my job as a coach to be like, you need to love soccer, you need to play in college, you need to do this. Like, this is something that people need to discover for themselves. Because like, if I'm constantly forcing them to train or play soccer, or their parents are constantly saying, oh, you need to go coach Erica, you need to go work out in the gym with her, and they don't like it, like, they're not going to be consistent with it. So, and that's fine.
Exactly.
There's no right or wrong. Like, that's the thing.
Entirely agree there. Like, it's the sort of thing where if you're a parent and you're living vicariously through your kid, you're doing them such a disservice, setting them up for life by pushing your wants, mental, emotional, physical sort of needs on them to be the person that you may have wanted to be. And you're trying to push them so hard in that direction. They're whether they like it, in a very few small amount of cases, maybe that's what they want to do, and it aligns awesomely. And then they take after you or whatever it may be. But in 98% of cases, that's not going to be the case. And that's when you get those super specialized kids that, whether they play soccer 6 days a week, do 3 sessions of strength coaching on top, and then have club and training at school, and like, it just ends up being a mess. And they're so burnt out that they end up hating it. This could be age 10, age 15, age 18. Like, and the sort of thing is, it doesn't relate to ability level. Like, just because they're really good at something doesn't mean they enjoy it. Like, there's a bit of a disconnect there where the parent that's pushing them is like, oh, they're doing really well, they're scoring goals, they're doing great, like, we're going to go to college or whatever it may be. But the child is so miserable going through the motions just to appease their parents, coaches, whoever it may be, but they feel like they have no out. And that's when, like, I feel a lot of those more sort of mental social issues can come into play, like start rebelling because that's something they feel they have a little bit of control over. Just their attitude turns for the worse because they're not enjoying what they're doing. And that comes back to exactly to what you were saying about purpose and trying to find that. It's the sort of thing where I view that even going into adulthood, like, for people that don't know what they want to do for a career, how many things have you really experienced to give you that past knowledge of what you like, what you enjoy. It's the sort of thing, in my view, if you haven't tried enough things to be able to have the perspective on what you could do, how are you meant to know? Like, as a kid, if you have only ever played soccer or only ever played lacrosse and not really expanded beyond that, like, there's so many different activities, hobbies, pastimes out there that you may love, maybe have a natural affinity for, maybe really talented at, but because you've never done it, you have no idea. And then you feel like you're longing for something more and you just don't know what it is. And that goes back exactly to that, where you just need to try things. And it's the sort of thing where, like, if you quit soccer, maybe you're lukewarm on it. You like it, you enjoy it. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't spike that fire in you. Mm-hmm. You can quit it, try something else. You can go back to it. Like, there's no, oh, you've burnt your bridge here, you're done completely. Like, you can never touch a soccer ball again after looking at it away for 3 weeks. Like, go back.
Yeah.
Whether, like, you get a lot of people, like, I've played soccer on and off since I was, I don't know, probably 11 or 12. Like, I've gone from soccer and then I started playing lacrosse. I've gone back to picking up soccer again a little. I then played a bit of basketball, back to soccer, playing lacrosse throughout. And it's the sort of thing, like, you can swap, chop and change. Like, you don't have to lock one thing in and commit to it for your entire life. Like,
yeah, that's
the freedom.
That's such a good, oh my gosh. Yeah, Aaron, that's such a good point. Like, I think, like, when parents are like, oh my gosh, like, what if they quit? Like, what if they don't like it and we have to, like, take a break?
They quit.
And it's like you said, you can always go back. Like, it's always going to be there. Like, and it's not like they're going to be a step behind. If anything, when they get back after, I don't know, like a year or two hiatus, maybe they'll love it even more and they'll be even better. Like, it's fine.
Exactly.
So that's such a
100%.
point. And another thing you had said was, like, their parents are forcing them to do it for all those years. And I don't want to say it was time wasted, but they were constantly going to their sports practice that they didn't like when they could have been discovering those other things that they did like, and they could have found that on, which is unfortunate. And I have seen this happen. I had one girl who had played her whole life up until college, but it was a situation where her dad was living vicariously through her, and she just kept playing, grinding, and just, like, not enjoying it. And then she committed to play in college at a good school. And then at the very last minute, she was like, I don't want to freaking do this anymore. And her dad was so upset she didn't play in college. And I was like, look, like, you did this. Like, she was pressured so much for all those years. And then up into that point that you wanted her to get at, she reached her max. She's like, I'm done.
Yeah. Breaking point, essentially.
It happens to thousands.
100%.
Like,
and it's the sort of thing where that can sour the relationship between the parent and the child there as well. Like, from more like psychosocial sort of family perspective there. Like, that can, if you push hard enough, like, that can break. Like, that's not something that you want to mess with that hard. And, like, my first job was actually, like, refereeing indoor soccer and, like, netball and at a sports center, essentially. And the amount of, like, parents that I would do, like, an under 7s or 8s game. So these kids, like, just learning to essentially walk and run around and then try and coordinate kicking a ball, like, is a massive task for them. Yeah. And you've got these parents on the sideline yelling, blasting them with instructions of go here, go there, like, kick it over there. And it's like, let your kid have fun. Like, what are you going to achieve? They can't comprehend running and kicking a ball at the same time. If you're barking positional instructions at them at the same time, like, they're not even hearing you. Like, you're wasting your breath there. Why do you feel that's a beneficial thing to occur? And, like, often a lot of time, like, maybe they didn't know better. Maybe that's how they were coached at the time, and that's what they see as, like, the best way. But you got to apply some, like, common sense to that. If you know what your young child is like at home. If you have a 7-year-old that can't eat without getting food over half of their body, do you think they're going to be able to listen to your tactical instructions while they're on a field playing with all this noise and stimulus around them? Like, no.
Yeah. They're probably, like, picking weeds or, like, looking at the sun. Like, you know, like.
Literally. Digging in the dirt.
Yeah, and back to just really educating ourselves on, or educating parents on child development, physically, but also mentally and from a neuroscience standpoint. And the brain is something I'm really fascinated with, and there's just so much we don't know about it, especially with youth. But like every drill that we do, or every session that we run, we should be asking, is this good for their brain? Is it good for helping them be independent in their thinking, be creative, problem solve, and we don't give them all the answers? And usually when we put the brain first, then the physical stuff comes second. So that's always been an interesting find for me, is just really designing sessions based on optimizing, building neural connections in the brain, and like really getting kids to connect the left and right hemisphere. I think a lot of kids nowadays are more left brain dominant, and they're more in like the analytical and like the structured side, and they are always given the answers, or everything's rehearsed. So just like really adding in the right brain and the spontaneity and the creativity is
creative expression.
Really beneficial. Yeah. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. It's the sort of thing like tailoring back to where we were talking sort of adult versus youth, like training demands there of, as an adult, you're generally going to be relatively developed already. Like you don't need that same like engagement factor in a drill. Like if I'm giving parameters within here to here for the child to basically express themselves in this wide range of a drill. Like if I say you have to run between these 3 tones, but you can do it in any way you want. You have to spin 5 times, you have to roll twice, and then they have to think, but they also have to express creatively. Like something like that, they may get so much more out of from a spatial awareness perspective, rather than me just saying run to here.
Yeah.
They may get more out of it from their, again, a coordination, proprioceptive perspective, and working their body with their mind in conjunction there. Whereas for an adult squat or something like that, like I may maybe give them similar parameters, but you have to do this to this and incorporate more like tactical elements where you have to make this pass looking this way and then shuttle back to here and then react to something over here, where it's obviously a lot more sort of constrained and you don't have the freedom of true expression there. But again, it's tailoring the drill to the person I'm giving it to. I need very different things out of a prime 26-year-old athlete than I would a 6-year-old. They're going to be completely different, but you're trying to develop them both. It's just very different spots on that same timeline there as well.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to just research more on the brain benefits to training youth, but also, like you said, the older clients as well, and they need it just as much, if not more. But
100%.
Actually, do you have any more things that you want to discuss? Yeah. So I remember like looking at your list, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is
so good.
Hour. So the max for an IG live is like 4 hours, which is crazy.
Jeez.
But we're not going to go that
far. All right. So you got 1 or 2 more. So what are your thoughts on athletes focusing on one sport as a bit of a specialization versus playing multiple, whether that be concurrently or over different seasons, like a summer-winter sort of season split? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I love this one because I've been going back and forth on it a lot. And in the past, or early in my coaching career, I was like, oh, early specialization, bad. But we have to define it first. So everyone defines it a little bit differently. So this is where it gets nuanced. But some people say it's just every season they're playing organized sports with like no other activity. But then you have another scenario where they're playing the same sport every season, but they're still supplementing with a performance program and some strength and conditioning. And that scenario is when I would say it's okay, because the strength training can count as a second sport. And it's nice because it's much easier to avoid overuse injuries from all the impact from running. Like sports like soccer and lacrosse in the same season, you don't want to do that, soccer and basketball. But if you're doing soccer And then strength training, you're getting all the impact and the running from the soccer, but the strength training, you're just building up the athlete to be able to handle all of that. So that's when I would say it's okay. But then when we look at the greats again, like LeBron, Tom Brady, Serena Williams, Mia Hamm, they all early sampled. And now it seems like everyone wants to do the opposite of what the greats did, which I'm like, wait, but like it did work for them and it worked for many people. And I think parents are just pressured now, which sucks. Like the system's set up as a business, and unfortunately they feel pressured to play year round. They're paying year round dues. So I think that's tough for them to navigate. And I know like some coaches will penalize like 8-year-olds for going to, like soccer players going to like a gymnastics practice and missing soccer and like penalizing them at a really young age. So I think parents are like trying to please the coach, but like trying to make the kid happy. So it is a really tough situation to navigate. But I will say like it's okay to not be in travel sports year round until you're like in high school. Like it's okay. Like you're not going to be late to the party. You're not going to fall behind. If anything, you're only going to benefit from it. Not just from a physical standpoint, like that's cool and all, like developing coordination, spatial awareness and all those things, like cool. But from a social standpoint and being in different environments with new coaches and new teammates, like soccer girls are very different than lacrosse girls, like, you know, like, so it's good to just get that social aspect. I think the more variety for kids, the better. So I go back and forth, like it's very nuanced, and I don't want to like be so far on one side, like, oh, early specialization sucks, or oh, I'm all about early sampling. I think it depends, and I know that's not like the sexy
Yeah. No, I would agree completely there, honestly. I think with most things training related, you can generally make a case either side. Like often it'll tip one side than the other, but a case can be made for both. Like this is a prime example. Like I would say it depends entirely. Like the context is everything. It's the sort of thing where like, in my view, the more specialized the sport is, the more important a bit of variability in it is needed. So something like, say, running or swimming, where you're logging huge amounts of kilometers, miles, and the like in very specific positions, that then becomes more important to get essentially the antitoxin work of, whether it be strength training, whether it be another sport as just some movement variability. That's when they become more important. But say something like soccer, basketball, lacrosse, like football to a degree, where there are a lot more open-based skills, like not so closed, where you're repeating the exact same pattern over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
You can get by just playing the same sport. Is that optimal? Arguable either way. I would say it depends on the person as much. Like going back to Tom Brady, LeBron, Serena Williams, Mia Hamm, etc. All of those individuals were obviously incredibly driven and so motivated to be the best at what they did. Had they played another sport, probably would have been maybe not as successful. They obviously gravitate towards ones that their body and physiology work well for, i.e. like LeBron's 6'8", LeBron, and at 250 isn't going to be an Olympic diver. It just ain't going to happen. But he could have been a good football player. Serena Williams could have potentially played in the WNBA with her level of power and athleticism. Wouldn't be surprised. But they succeeded because they committed and were driven enough to put in the work to be the best at what they did. Whether like, and a lot of some like specific sports have a lot of correlation. So like basketball and lacrosse have a decent amount of correlation in the way that the actual game is structured in terms of pick and rolling and the like. And players that are very successful at one can often go on to do the other. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Pat Spencer. He was a Loyola player who won the Tewaton, like best college lacrosse player, and was incredibly dominant, one of best ever college players. Went on to play a 5th year of basketball at Northwestern because was very good at one, was also very good at the other. And AI, like Allen Iverson, was a better football recruit than he was a basketball recruit. Again, was very successful at both, playing both. Does that mean everyone can succeed at both? I would say no. It takes a lot of mental attention and ability to be able to spread yourself thinner than that, rather than just the one sport where obviously a lot of people succeed just playing one. People succeed playing two. There's no correct answer there. It's a very context, situation by situation sort of dependent thing. And yeah, going back to the specialization level of how close the skill is, like a lacrosse player that then plays soccer in the off season is probably going to benefit a lot more from that than an Olympic gymnast or something like that, where it's a more of a closed sort of skill, and they're not getting the same reaction component to a defender, to an opponent there, where I am getting better at seeing spatial awareness sort of in terms of reading defenses and the like. That's a universal skill between sport. Being able to see the space and project myself in there, again, universal between sport. And those are the sort of pillars that allow you to transfer from one to the other and get better without actually playing your sport.
Yes.
But again, it goes back to, is that something that if you're enjoying it more, going and playing something else, and it's a bit of a break from your sport, from your grind, as per some people may call it, you may come back mentally refreshed, and that alone may be enough of a benefit to take a little bit of time off there and come back. Like you look at what Jordan did, how he went to Michael Jordan, went to play baseball. I think I just swallowed a fly.
Yikes.
Protein. Anyway.
There you go.
Michael Jordan went to play baseball in the middle of their, they won 3 in a row, then he dipped. Got bored, whatever it may be, then comes back and has a renewed sort of vigor for the game, and then goes and wins 3 more. Would that have happened if he had stayed there? Arguably, yes. No, like he form-wise was in there, but if he's not mentally invested enough, like how can you change that? You can't change that by putting more effort in. It's not something that's that controllable.
Yeah, you need that.
In my view, anyway.
That variability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even just like a change of scenery, a change of situation can provide that on its own.
Yeah, it's so important to just have that variety. And I've seen it a lot with soccer players. They just hit a wall. They hit a wall in high school because they had specialized too early, and like their parents are just frustrated. They're like, wait, why aren't they reacting fast enough? Why aren't they moving into and like reading the game? Why aren't they a couple steps ahead? But then like when I see the players who had played other sports and got that variability, but it had some carryover. So like lacrosse or basketball or even like fencing, they were more aware of how to like move their bodies in space and how to react. And like they were the ones who weren't hitting a wall. They were surpassing everyone else. Another example, I talked to an amazing track runner the other day. She ran track Division I in college and like broke a ton of records. And she was like,
awesome.
yeah, like I did softball and until age 13. And then she did track.
Exactly.
Then she did track and she broke records. And what she said was the dance, especially because a lot of people are like, whoa, track and dance, so vast.
Rhythm and timing.
Crazy. Yeah, it was really the rhythm, the coordination. And she said, like, as soon as she like ran a sprint or got into hurdling, she was ready to go. Like she knew how to like strike the ground. She knew how to
feel the cadence of it.
It was just very smooth because she had done dance. And like some people get frustrated because they're just like running the hurdles over and over again. And it's like, well, putting in more work isn't necessarily going to help. You need to have that.
Exactly. It's not always the answer.
And it's like, it's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
It's crazy.
And it's very interesting, like, because I would argue that whether it be even from a non-just sporting perspective, like a lot of musicians have the same sort of epiphany there, for lack of a better term, where the rhythm and timing and sense of like sort of flow they develop from playing their instrument carries over when they get to a sporting field. Because I mean, everything is timing and cadence. How well I can react to an opponent coming at me, it's still a timing thing. Like I need to see you move. I need to then time my movement to sort of intercept you or whatever it may be. And yeah, I know a lot of musicians that have the same sort of flow and rhythm sense there. And going back to when you were talking in terms of the athlete that doesn't look very sort of interested, feels slower on field, and they're like, are you familiar with like flow state?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to butcher his name, but Chiksai Mensihai, or I don't even know how to say it. You know who I mean though, yeah?
20 letters long, like, I don't know.
That's the one. Yeah, his sort of theory of optimal arousal and like intensity level of the difficulty level, where you need your arousal level to be high enough to match the difficulty level. So if the difficulty level is super high, I need to be just as aroused to match that perfect point. If my arousal level is really low and it's anything beyond a laughable sort of contest, you're not really going to be in that flow state. You're going to look disengaged. You're going to look slower. You're going to feel out of sync with everything going on around you, just because you're not as invested as the other people around you. Mm-hmm. And it's very tough to manufacture flow state. You need to have the circumstances line up and be ready on the day for that sort of thing. Like, I'm sure you can think back to a couple times in your career, or probably hopefully many, where you've had that perfect alignment of situations that you were just, that was it. That was the day you were dialed in. Yeah. And you think back and you're like, I can understand that now, why I got into it then. But there'd probably be times after that where you felt just as good, circumstances have been all the same, and you just haven't been in there for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes into play when you're thinking of another sport where the challenge may be higher than if you're quite good at your sport, whether it be soccer, lacrosse, whatever, and you do quite well in your normal sort of season, and you go on to something where the challenge is completely different. You're still like physically and athletically capable, but it's new circumstances. You're having to perceive different things. You're having to execute different skills, and mm-hmm. that challenge goes up. But then your arousal is already perfect there, and they match. And that's the sort of thing where
I really like
experience can be so beneficial.
Yeah, and I think this relates to burnout as well. Like the people who are doing like the 5 days a week of the same sport over and over again, some of them struggle to get into that flow state because the arousal is just so high, and it's like the same stimulus.
Your nervous system is beat up.
Yeah, they're just beat up. They're doing the same thing, like too much repetition, and they're just frustrated. And a lot of people do get into a rut, or they just plateau. So I think that we have to
going through the motions.
Going through the motions. So yeah, that's such a good point. I never tied flow state to the concept of burnout and early specialization. That's a really interesting point.
I think it's quite interesting as well. Like, obviously, Australia versus the States have a very different sort of sporting structure overall. Like, we aren't very big on like sort of high school sport. Like, we have everything is basically clubs where you go and play for your, say, like I live in Yarraville, so my local club might be Yarraville Soccer Club, and I go play for them, and we do our trainings outside of like normal sort of school time and the like. Train a Tuesday or Thursday, and then play on a Saturday or something like that. And that, like, if you're doing extra work on top, that's generally in your own time. So even throughout high school, it's quite interesting to see the dichotomy there of like, because obviously I'm quite invested in the lacrosse scene, and that's way, way bigger in America than it is here. So seeing like athletes that play for their high school team are playing travel at the same time, and then trying to play like a club on top, or they're going to recruiting events. And it's like, you've got 4 different streams there that might easily be 7 days a week. Like, if you're trying to perform 7 days a week, how do you expect to last, just longevity wise? How do you expect to be able to perform at your best if you're constantly beat up and super fatigued? And then that's not even factoring any school, any grades, any social development. Whether you're getting towards the later end of your teen years, you might have a job, you might have a boyfriend or girlfriend, you might have other hobbies as well. And like, it essentially takes over your life there. And it's quite interesting, to see the difference of how it is here, where high school sport does exist, but generally it's sort of localized to within private schools where they play one another. Whereas like most normal high schools and public schools, like, you have 1 day per term where you basically go into a round robin against the other schools in your area. If you win that, you go to the next one, and that's one more day. And then you win that, you go to states. And that's like 3 or 4 days of sport in a term. You may get 1 or 2 practices, like as a team before that. Generally, it's like the day before at a lunchtime. You give up your lunchtime to go talk to the coach with the team, essentially. And like, it's such a different system. And I would say it's not inherently better or worse. It's just the way that it is, whether that be through previous structures being set up as to locationally, or I have no idea why that is that way, but that's just the way that it is. What are your thoughts on the differences there?
Well, I was going to ask you what would be your ideal schedule for
ideal? Ooh. That's tough. I from my perspective, I can only really, I guess, experience and sort of enunciate what I would have been through in our system, whereas I wouldn't know the ins and outs of yours to the same degree. I can look at it from an outside perspective, but I can't comment on within. So say I'm talking for an Australian athlete. The way I would say as a youth athlete, someone talking sort of 12 to 16 in that sort of bracket, I would say 2 sort of team training orientated sessions, obviously intensity scaled appropriately, 1 to 2 sort of extra like conditioning sessions, whether that be like lifting weights, whether that be working out specific things, whatever it may be, just some sort of solo training aside from the sport team training, and then a game. So that does total 5 days a week. I think it's important to go with the flow, for lack of a better term there, where if you've had an overtime game on the Saturday and you're meant to do some sort of lift on Sunday, like if you need to completely scale down the intensity, like it's not the end of the world. Mm-hmm. Your recovery for that next week and being in a position where you can attack the week is probably more important than that Sunday session at full intensity. Mm-hmm. If you can drop that to, whether it be you cut the volume by 50%, you cut the intensity of your working weights by 50%, or you just, instead of going and doing a weight session, you play some spike ball, or you go for like some park frisbee or something where you're getting that mental break as well, and you're enjoying what you're doing and having fun. Like that can be enough of a refresher where you may work so hard, but it doesn't feel like work because you're enjoying it. It's the sort of thing where like, if I told you, all right, you're going to go for a 5-mile run and basically just slog it out, how hard do you think that perceived effort's going to be doing that versus if I got you to play a 90-minute soccer game, like a fun social sort of game there where you may run 5 miles as well, but it's going to feel like that and you're going to have fun doing it compared to the 5-mile just straight pounding the pavement run. And that's like that mental break as well, where I think we almost put too much emphasis on the physical recovery without the mental recovery there.
Yeah.
That extra work may be better for me as a whole system than just the individual components of, all right, we're going to drop the intensity here slightly, but I still feel mentally exhausted from the day before and I don't want to get in the weight room. So like, what do I do? Yeah.
That's a good template. I do like that. The 2 times a week with the team is a nice sweet spot. 3 at the most, and then ensuring they're getting that twice a week with the physical training, like the strength ability work. And then I do like the idea of the recovery. It doesn't just have to be a bunch of stretching. It could be just you play a fun game. You could maybe just do like a round of dodgeball or some handball. And they're getting the mental break from their sport, but they're still developing these other athletic qualities, and they're getting that training variability in. So we can say that the year-round athlete is playing another sport in a way.
Exactly.
That's something I've definitely done in my sessions. Is we'll warm up with handball. Why not?
I love it.
If we do that 10 minutes every day or every time they come in, like they're getting so much out of that than just always doing like the structured dynamic warm up that I take them through. It's nice to just change it up a little bit. And a lot of these soccer players, they're always kicking. They're very quad dominant. It's like, look, like I want to develop the upper as well. So we're gonna play ball. We're gonna play dodgeball. We're gonna, I don't know, do like wheelbarrow races, like
encourage competitiveness as well. I think that's a theme in all of the things you've mentioned there. Like you're allowing them to be competitive and you're encouraging that while warming up. And like that's awesome. Like
Yeah.
I do a lot of sort of like med ball throws, and like even with my sort of general population clients where we might warm up with like an ISO lunge hold or something like that and just go, all right, like this was your time last time. Let's see how close you can get to beating that or beat it. Or this is what I'm setting you for today. I want to see if you can get in 100 wall balls under 3 minutes or something like that, where I try and give them a time, a score or something to compete against, or whether it's a partner, like if it's a 2-on-1 session, they're competing against each other there. Like obviously scale to ability level as best you can, but making it so that they're both in with a chance to win. And like everyone wants to compete, like whether people say it or not. Like I think it's something very tied to just human nature as a whole. Like we're competitive beings, and then encouraging that and like fostering that in that environment is awesome, especially with like youth athletes, where I think it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but the whole system trying to take competitiveness out of people, trying to make everything completely even, completely fair, completely null across the board, removing people's competitive nature is more prominent than ever.
Like
exactly. Everyone, like participation medals. Whether I'm not too sure what your thoughts are on that, but I'm sure you're probably going to be similar vein where I don't want a participation. I don't want a medal for coming 8th. Like that defeats the whole purpose of a medal. If I win, cool. Give me recognition for winning. If I don't, I keep moving. I realize I need to assess what I did wrong, assess what I can do better, and go from there. Like, and that's the thing. You can have the perfect lead up to something and lose because they were just better on the day. Like, it is what it is at the end of the day. Like, if your be all end all is going to be just winning there, like, it's not great. I hate to break it to you, but that's not always going to happen. There's going to be things like a referee might make a call against you. You can have the perfect game and then lose because the ref decided to call a penalty for the other team in the 96th minute of injury time. Like, it ain't always fair, but developing that resilience to then bounce back from something where you feel you may have been screwed over is so huge.
Yeah, and that everyone gets a participation trophy culture, just it doesn't encourage hard work. So
exactly. Why would I put the same effort in?
Definitely against it, because it's not real life. If I got like a gold star every time I went into work today, or like wrote a blog post, like I'd be like, what the heck? Like I don't need to do this. Like, or you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's just like,
you think it's good for the first week and then realize that whether I do my work, whether I don't do my work, I'm getting rewarded either way. So it moots the whole point.
Yeah, it does. It discourages hard work and creativity.
Ambition even. Ambition on top.
Now I want to shift gears, and I just want to ask you like a totally like offbeat question. But I know we had like conversations last year about how like we saw the silver lining in 2020, and I just want to know, like, what are you doing to move forward in 2021 based off of like what you went through last year and like how you had to adapt? Like what's your main focus this year as a coach, as a business owner, a content creator?
I love it. Awesome question. So obviously to those who aren't sort of aware, last year was a good year for the way that I look at it. I try to take positives out of everything like that. I was able to sort of move on from my first sort of job in the industry of training as a personal trainer out of a local gym, and was able to basically get Ultra Performance legitimized and started there. So I have taken most of my clients, or had taken most of my clients off, begun training in sort of more outdoor areas and the like, and started to scale up there. And going into sort of 2021, my main sort of focuses are to essentially try and help and reach more people than I can in just a physical area, physical location. Because obviously lacrosse, my sort of specialized sport, isn't too big within Australia. And the amount of people that play in America and Canada far, far outweighs what we have here. So at the moment, I've actually got an ebook in the work called Rotational Blueprint. So that's coming along quite good. Essentially, what that is going to be a comprehensive training program that tailors the strength and sort of structural work with technical drills as well as movement sort of mobility drills. So it's like a 3-part comprehensive training program that you could run multiple cycles of. So you run it for 2 months here, then you can run it back again with modified numbers and the like, and have that dial in your ability to run fast, throw with power, and handle the demands of that sort of sport. So that doesn't just pertain to lacrosse, that can expand to baseball, softball, handball, like American football, tennis, javelin, discus, shot put, all of the above. So that's in the works now. I'm looking at sort of expanding within my own physical area as well, and upping the numbers of people I'm working with, essentially, whether that be general population that want to move better, feel better, live healthier lives, and feel more content within their own body. It's the sort of thing like, obviously COVID has amplified a lot of the habits people had before, whether that be good or bad. So people have gotten fitter, stronger, healthier, faster than ever because it's given them more time to focus on what they were doing. On the other side of the coin, though, people have also lost a lot of their fitness, whether that be putting on weight, losing strength, losing mobility and movement capability there. So being able to sort of reach out within my own area and scale up there is another sort of thing I'm focusing on as well. Looking at the potential of maybe a venue as well within the next sort of 8 to 12 months, which is quite exciting. Just basically biding my time on that one for now, waiting for the right sort of opportunity to present itself, or not even present itself, but for the opportunity to be the right time to meet it.
That's awesome, Aaron.
And that's about it. What about you? What are your sort of thoughts going into 2021? Or I say going into 2021, but it's like almost mid-March.
Well, yeah, first off, I think that's exciting. I think the ebook that you're writing, it is very niche, but like you said, it can be used for all rotational sports. So I'm like really excited to see what you come up with there, and just blending the technical and physical aspect. That's really, really cool. And then I know that you were talking about getting a facility, so that's exciting that you're still thinking about that, and that might happen in the year. So that's really cool. It's been awesome to just like, since I forget when we had first exchanged messages, I think it might have been like 3 months ago maybe, but yeah, it's just been
something like that.
Yeah. It's just been awesome to see just your growth and like your content and just like who you're working with. Yeah, it's really cool.
Appreciate that.
Okay, so for me, like I'm at the point where I'm like really moving into purpose even more. And I'm just not, like, early on in my coaching career, like I did put a lot of pressure on myself, like pressure to get certifications, pressure to get more clients. And of course, like you're starting a business, of course you're going to put pressure on yourself to get clients, pressure to create content, get on social media, everywhere. And like, I just feel for like the past 9 years, like, yeah, I've enjoyed it. I love what I do more and more each year, but I did put a lot of pressure on myself. And like, now I'm at the point, I'm just like, I'm exhausted. Like, I'll be honest, like I can say that. I'm totally exhausted. And it wasn't until like 2020 last year where I was just like, you know what, like, screw it. Like, I'm just going to just have fun with this and not even put pressure on myself anymore. Like, I just don't even like care. Like, I'm going to just like focus on still getting good at my craft, like having fun in the sessions, relaxing, like not being so serious all the time. And that's just been such a nice change. And now in 2021, I just want to have even more fun with it. And like now that I'm in Tampa, it's really humbling. And I feel like I am back at the beginning of my career, which is really nice because, like, I hate to curse, but like I'm not shit here. Like, no one knows me, and it's kind of cool because
100%.
Just be grateful for anyone who wants to work with me and like really serve them and do a good job. But again, I'm not putting pressure on myself like I did early in my career. and that's been fun. So yeah, I'm working with a couple of athletes already. I'm in week 3 here, and when I met them for the first time, I'm just really grateful for you guys. Like, that's what I said to them. I was like, I'm just
100%, yeah.
like, so I just want to just keep having fun with it, keep impacting kids in Tampa, like I had done in Maryland for the past several years, and worldwide, remotely. Like, I just want to go like really big with this, because like this stuff is a requirement. Like, the strength training for all youth athletes,
100%.
like this is a requirement. Like, you can't, there's no excuses. It's so beneficial for you physically and mentally, and I want them to really enjoy doing it. And that's and that's the purpose that I'm really leaning into this year, is like, I just want everyone to have access to this, because it is easy to execute. It is easy to do like twice a week of strength at home if you have to. Like, so from a content standpoint, I just want to get out like really simple and like actionable content so people can like execute it immediately.
Very big take-home points there.
Yeah.
100%. I think it's quite interesting, obviously, talking about how you are trying to basically scale yourself up as big as possible whilst also putting that pressure on yourself to deliver. I think that goes back hand in hand with what we're talking about with a lot of youth athletes, where that emotional component of
Oh, did you pause?
all good?
Yeah, we're good. Oh no, I think I'm losing Aaron. Uh-oh. Oh, hold on. Let me I'm gonna try and get him on here again. All right. No.